Good afternoon. My name is Davis Rowe. I'm a freshman, business administration major from Atlanta, Georgia. Today I'm going to be doing my chapter 6 monologue from the book, The History of Black Business in America. Okay, so just a little context to the book. It's really just a book about that, just as literally in the title talks about the history of African Americans and how they've made their different business ventures and overcome struggles and whatnot to create good business for themselves in America. Okay, so let's go ahead and start off with different triumphs from black businesses that have come into play and that were mentioned and discussed in chapter 6. So we can start off with the North Carolina Mutual Insurance Company. Okay, so it provided a lot of financial courtesies towards African Americans, especially because there was different groups of people who didn't have the proper not that they didn't have the proper wealth, but they had limited resources and all that. And so it was founded in 1898 in Durham, North Carolina, and it was founded by 7 African American men who had all been denied specific financial assistance services by but their white counterparts. They also specialized in a burial insurance. So during this time in history, there was the Civil War. So the Civil War was happening a lot, and there would be casualties on the battlefield, and so African Americans would get in where they fit in. They would do the work that others didn't want to do. So burial services was one of those services. The impact of Madam C.J. Walker was very instrumental because she was a self-made millionaire for the time, and that's not very common. Okay, she sold hair care products for black African American women, and her business was founded in the early 1900s. And not only that, she also empowered many women for creating jobs, and it also promoted self-acceptance for black women in America because they already not they but they did stand out. We have another business. It was called Freedom National Bank. It fostered economic growth in black slash African American communities, and it also provided different types of financial support, and it created a balance in the communities for African Americans because because white and mainstream banks were not really in look of supporting African Americans. So that was another something that they had to overcome, and that's where they succeeded in, because when black people didn't have businesses, they just created their own and worked within their own community to build and thrive together. So we have the Atlanta Life Insurance Company. That is slightly different from the mutual insurance company because this created a sense of financial independence within the African American community, and it was founded by Alonzo Herndon in 1905. This company still is in existence to this day and still does exist in Atlanta. And a fun fact about it is that the Atlanta Life Insurance Company sold MLK an insurance policy. So that was something I thought that was pretty cool, and I wanted to mention in this monologue. So, and the fifth triumph for black business that was mentioned in chapter 6 was the Johnson Publishing Company. So this was established in 1912. It was a company that published media for African Americans it gave African Americans specific representation that they were lacking. So especially during these times, black people didn't really have much rights, weren't seen as equals or people. So when in giving them support, by giving them support and representing them well in the media, it's a better way to get them names out there, and what better way than doing it by owning it by black people. So while there was definitely many triumphs and success for black business in chapter 6, but there's also a few economic suppressions. So we can start with discriminatory lending practices. So there were always, like I said earlier, because black people were not seen as equal, or people like humans, not seen as humans or equal as the white person. There were systemic barriers put in place for accessing loans. So just like in today's times, if you don't have good credit, you can't get a loan. You can't get It's going to be hard for you to get a loan from the bank and all that. It's going to be the same concept here, but except they're using the argument that this person is black and not white. They charged higher interest rates towards blacks and African Americans. So if they're already, needing a loan and they're in financial trouble, it's going to be harder they're going to be less likely to take the loan because the interest rate is higher and it's not going to benefit them. The second type of suppression is the limited access to markets. It denied opportunities to compete in mainstream markets for African Americans, and it had informal networks and closed purchasing practices that prevented black people from having access to different trade networks and whatnot, so that it prevented them from succeeding in the business world. Which goes to my next point, that there was a major exclusion from trade associations. So they were shut out of key trade associations, which basically means there are no trade. So they couldn't trade or communicate or network with other people. And it also hindered the ability to navigate the business landscape. Because if you can't trade and communicate with other businesses, you can't succeed as a whole, right? So my next point is that there was segregated economic systems. So what does that mean? That there was different economic systems. So there would be black communities and white communities, for example. You'd have the white community that was flourishing, doing well, and they kept to themselves, and they were already set up for success, where you had black people trying to start and create nothing from the ground up, right? And so, wow, I just lost my train of thought. Right. So sorry about that. The segregated economic systems created. My last point with that was that it restricted access to potential suppliers. I apologize for that. Not only did it segregate economic system, but it also created a hostile regulatory environment. What does that mean? It means that black-owned businesses had to follow specific guidelines that were set in place so that they couldn't succeed. So, say take a business, for example, that was trying to, that had a tax of, say, 15%, right? The minimum was 15%, and a white-owned business only had to pay 15% of their taxes or whatever. I'm just throwing a number out there. The black-owned business would have to pay 25 or 30%, just more. It would be more in place. So there were many hostile policies that were not equal to white businesses, and they basically made that, like I said earlier with the taxes, that was just an example. There were also compliance costs, so it led to further economic disparities. So it leads you to wonder, the ones who did succeed, how did they succeed? Do you think that they succeeded through success or luck, or through prayer, or through just skill of just working hard and grinding? Honestly, I think it's had a factor to do with all of it, because not everybody's going to start at the same place, and not everybody's going to, be start off in the same place. So for those who prayed to God and all that, believe that, God led them to the right spot and whatnot. There are also those who worked hard and started from the ground up. And there are also people who knew somebody who could get them, who started them in a higher place. It really, I feel like, just depends on specific scenarios and situations, because it really just boils down to the person. Because, so there are people in the modern day who work 3 times as hard. I've been in scenarios where I've worked 3 times as hard as somebody just to keep up with others. And then there are some who just have it handed to them and they make it all the way to the top with no problem. So it really just depends, and I feel like it's really circumstantial to each person. Let's see. I can explain. Okay, well. So it can then another question gets brought up, that how can the ones around you, how can we all work together? How can we all do well? Do we have to rely on luck? I personally feel like I'm set up for a good scenario, in a good place at Morehouse College, because you don't only go to Morehouse College to get a great education. You go because the networking. Like you said, there are Morehouse alumni who have their Morehouse brothers every day, talk to, can always count on somebody for a new opportunity or help with something, whatever. So just in my dorm alone, I have a network of brothers who can always help me, and we can all work together to achieve a common goal of success. And so I feel like if we all work together, then we can really do well as a whole and succeed in business. Excuse me, if that makes sense. All in all, with the history of African American in the history of black business in African American history, I think that it was just is a informative book about just putting together business and showing how black people overcame troubles and really worked to build a name for what and who they are as people. And so it really made me think to myself that it's working hard and creating business is possible, even if there are boundaries set up for you to fail and there's things that get in your way. There's always, if you keep your head up and keep working, you're going to see progress and you're going to find what you need to do. So I think that's always a plus about something with the book. And really, yeah, that's about it. So thank you for your time. Thank you for listening, and I appreciate it.